Well, welcome Keri Helmick to the stage. Keri, thanks for being here.
Yeah,
I'm so
thanks for having me.
excited to see you back. Keri has been a Bloom leader for us in the past, and we've gotten to know each other on multiple levels. And so I asked Keri to come today and talk to us about parenting in the elementary school stage, kind of that 6 to 10-year-old stage. And so we have a picture of your family that we want to put up, and I'll let you introduce them.
Okay, so Stephen and I have been married for 17 years, and we got married really young. It's not because I'm old. And
if you don't know, if you don't recognize Stephen, if you have kids at Roberts Elementary, Stephen is the principal there. And we were lucky enough and blessed enough to experience him as a teacher and then also as a principal.
He's pretty great.
He is great.
Emma is our oldest. She's 12 and is in 7th grade. So my kids were all like 20 to 22 months apart. So it felt really fast.
Yeah.
But the way that their ages, birthdays, I guess, are, they're every other year in school. So Emma's in 7th grade, she's 12. Drew is 10, and he's in 5th grade. Sophie with the glasses, she's 8 in 3rd grade. And then Eliza there at the bottom she just turned 7. She's in 1st grade. They're so cute.
They are. They are the cutest kids and just such a fun family. And so as you hear that, you hear that Keri has one that's kind of out of this stage. She has one that is right at the tail end, about to move out of this stage, and then 2 that are still in that stage. And so you have a multitude of perspectives for us this morning. Okay, so if you could go back to yourself as you are about to enter this stage with your oldest, kind of those elementary years, what would you say to yourself?
I would tell myself that I was going to like this stage a lot better than the one before it. I am not really a baby person. I felt like I liked my kids a lot more once they were like 18 months and older. And so this stage is way better for me.
Yeah, we were talking about this last night a little bit, just about how it's like, in a way, you kind of feel like you can sort of at least catch your breath. Like they don't always follow you into the bathroom anymore. Hopefully not. They can feed themselves. They can get themselves dressed.
They buckle themselves in the car.
A lot of independence. They can swim.
They can swim. It's amazing.
Yeah, so it's kind of life-changing at this stage.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's fleeting. Like it's a short stage.
Yes.
And then it's over.
Yes. And then
they can still do all those things, but it's a little different.
And you're heading there.
I'm heading there. Yeah. I would have also told myself that I will not have it figured out. I'm never going to arrive as a parent, which is kind of disappointing. But I'm never going to then I'll feel like I've got it. I feel like I've got it figured out. Like now I know what I'm doing as a parent.
Yeah. I mean,
that hasn't happened.
Because 4 kids, 4 different
personalities. And not mine. Like they don't have my personality.
Yes.
And I feel like that would have been nice.
Yeah. Like a little more. Although I have one that's kind of similar, and like you get bugged.
That doesn't work either.
I mean, it just doesn't. It's just hard all the way around. But you do feel a little bit of a reprieve. But I love that. The freedom of saying, I don't have to have it all figured out. I'm never going to, and not to expect that of yourself. Because I think we can self-impose some guilt and shame as moms, thinking, I should have this figured out by now. I mean, I've had 4 rounds. We're at 12 years old. Like, I should kind of have my act together. And it just doesn't work like that. And thank goodness, because then if it did, we would depend on ourselves.
Yes, it gives us like a real-time, a real-time example of how we all need Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit just about what this stage has been and is like for your family, a little bit about your kids. Just kind of give us a little bit of a peek into the Helmicks so we can kind of understand what this stage has been like for you guys.
So I do think there's a lot of freedom in this stage just because they can do so much themselves, and not only just taking care of themselves, but some of my kids like to cook, so they might, especially like breakfast, scrambled eggs, pancakes, things like that. They can experiment with things like that. My son actually really likes to cook, and he'll brown meat for me, which is wonderful. And because I think that's so boring, and they'll make desserts, and that's really fun. I'm not a morning person, but Drew and Sophie, my middle two, they'll wake up on a Saturday or even a Sunday sometimes, and they'll like make pancakes and eggs and get the table set, and then come be like, "We have breakfast ready," and I'm like, that's when I feel like I've arrived. I'm like, what
I
is
have
this? Never grow
succeeded
up.
at motherhood. Yeah. Yeah.
And
No,
that's really fun.
well, I love that because I think one of the things that we can miss in our culture that does so much for our kids and expects little of them, what you miss is you miss them feeling like a valuable part of your family. And when you give someone responsibility, or they take it upon themselves to be responsible, that builds a feeling of value in them, and it makes them feel like, I'm important, I'm needed around here. Now, what you have to be careful of is the mess that comes with.
Oh yeah, because they don't clean it up.
Yeah.
And it's not like like pancakes are messy.
Yes. Syrup.
And eggs on
sticky.
the stove. It's,
Yeah.
You still have a job, like as a mom.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. For
But
sure.
they do help. Like my kids do chores around the house, so they'll unload the dishwasher or clean the bathroom, vacuum, fold towels, things like that, which is really helpful. So I don't feel like I'm doing everything, though I think telling kids to pick up might be forever because they don't do that.
Yes. I mean, I haven't gotten all the way to forever yet, but in my experience, it hasn't stopped yet.
It hasn't really worked for my husband either. So.
Yes.
So I think I'll
Yes.
always be doing that. That hasn't changed
Yeah.
in this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about some different areas and maybe some things that you have done well with your kids in this stage of these elementary years, and maybe even some things that you wish you'd done differently. But let's talk about just spiritually in this stage. How have you guys invested in your kids? What are some ways that you've found for this age to be good ways to point their hearts towards Jesus, to help them develop spiritually?
I feel like this stage, more so for me than the whatever before school stages, I can get to see who God has created my kids to be and help them see that. So one of the things that I've talked to my kids about is that as parents, we don't get a manual for what their personality is, what motivates them. And so we're learning that alongside them. And we get the opportunity to say, I see this in you. And I think this is how God created you. And, okay, so Drew plays soccer, and he's on defense. And last year, he was really struggling with that because he doesn't score goals because he's like way too far down the field. But he's really good at defense. But the team celebrates when everybody gets a goal. They're not like, oh, nice save. They just don't say that. And so he was just struggling to feel like he was a valuable part of the team. And Drew's a really cool kid. He's got like a real old soul, and he's very loyal. And I was just able to have a conversation with him saying, I think that you're a really loyal person. To me, it makes sense that you're a defender because you're like protecting the team. And he's not naturally really aggressive, so he doesn't like to be like in the tussle for the ball. He likes to predict where it's going to come out, and he's good at that. And it was like this light bulb went off, and he was like, oh, I think I am loyal. And we were able to talk about how I think God created you that way, and that's great.
I mean, like, that's where it's at. That
it's so
is
cool.
like, those are the money moments as a parent. When you can, I mean, I call it casting vision for your kids and helping them see God has created you this way, and this is what it could look like.
Yeah. And they don't always see that. Even things that are obvious to us about their personalities or that become obvious, they might not see that as a strength because it most likely comes naturally to them. A lot of our strengths do.
Yes. And so it feels like not a big deal.
It feels like this is easier for everybody.
Yeah, we've talked about that in a work sense on our team and just in our roles, and how when you're in the right role, it feels like really? I mean, I'm not doing very much because it comes naturally.
For sure.
But that's a sign that you're kind of in that sweet spot of where God's created you. And so I love casting that vision for your kids about how God has created them, and then giving them some idea of what it could look like and relating it back to their character.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book that one of the leaders reminded me of this chart. The book is called The Christian Parenting Handbook, and in the very back is a chart of character qualities and how they can manifest in a negative way or an immature way. And this was life-changing for me with my oldest, Caroline, whom you know, because when Caroline was younger, she was just kind of like, whatever, I don't really care. Sure, yeah, I've got homework. I mean, I'll kind of study. And so I'm looking down the negative column, okay, for lazy, unmotivated, apathetic, like all of these things that I'm seeing and feeling as a mom. And I look over, and so for Drew, you're seeing like not aggressive, more stand back, those kinds of things. And I'm looking for these negative qualities, and I look over to the positive character traits, and it says contentment. And I tear up every time talking about this, because God was like, I've wired her to be this way, and it is a good thing. And you're seeing that manifested in an immature way right now. And you can challenge her in some of those things, but man, to have a kid who's content, like, that's a huge blessing. And so if you need that chart, like, it's worth the price of buying the book. I'm serious. Because it really helps you understand the character in your kid that might still be immature in these stages.
When there's some things that we can try to grow in our kids, and some things that we teach them, and there's some things that they just have.
Yeah.
That is just God-given gifts. And I think it's a privilege that we get as parents to see that and to say, I see this in you, and that's from God.
Absolutely.
That's not because we've been working on that. That's not because I'm like that and you're like that. It's because that's you.
Yeah, it's how God made you. I love that conversation.
And that can even go to weaknesses or just hard things that our kids deal with. Sophie, with the one with glasses that's in 3rd grade, I could say she struggles with spelling, but she's really like just terrible. It's really bad. And sometimes feels insecure about that. Usually it's when Eliza, the 1st grader, is like, how do you spell that? Because she's real detailed, and Eliza is, and she's kind of perfectionistic and wants to get things right. So she's constantly, how do you spell this? How do you spell this? And Sophie's like, I don't know, and I don't care. I've never thought about that. But then she's like, I should know that. I'm older.
Yeah.
And partly, I mean, there's a lot of successful people that don't spell well. So that's not a real big deal to me. But we talk a lot about how God is writing your story. And when it's hard things, simple things like not spelling well, or hard things like grief, like you guys were talking about earlier, I don't have to explain why God does what he does. I can try to help, but I don't have to make sense of it, because there's some things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
And I can come alongside my kids and say, I don't know why God is writing this into your story, but I trust that he's good.
Yeah.
And we're going to walk through that. I'm going to walk through that alongside you.
Yeah. And I know he has a purpose.
Yeah.
He doesn't do things without reason and purpose. Yeah, that's so good. Let's talk a little bit relationally about your family And I mean, I know you guys have a lot of fun, and I know Steven is like,
Fun is like Steven's number one grid that he puts life through.
that's his number one value is
Yeah.
fun, which
That
makes her a
picture-
great teacher and a great principal.
It's true. That picture that we had was just a couple weeks ago. We went to Northwest Arkansas and did mountain biking for the weekend.
I should have had you bring some more pictures of Steven, but we probably would have gotten sidetracked.
Definitely, for
Yeah,
sure.
he has multiple costumes for all different events.
He has a costume closet at home and at school.
Mhm. Yeah, so he's a lot of fun. So talk to us about your family and how you guys have invested and built relationships just as a family together and even kind of individually with your kids.
So we like spending time together in general as a family. We do a lot of things as a family, like mountain biking, which would not have been my first go-to. I have like the bravery of, I don't know, it's less than Eliza, and usually I follow her on the trail. I'm like, I'll stick with Eliza, and it's really because I'm scared. But we do a lot of things together. Like if Drew or Sophie, they play soccer, so we'll go to their soccer games together and cheer each other on. And Emma plays volleyball or does drama, so we'll go to that as a family. And what we try to encourage is it's okay to celebrate other people and still be confident in who you are. That celebrating somebody else doesn't diminish who we are. So, for example, if Sophie gets up on water skis and we're cheering for her and saying, you did it, that was great, you stayed up so long. It doesn't mean that Emma didn't do well water skiing. It means that right now we're celebrating Sophie. And that doesn't mean that everybody else didn't do well or that Sophie was the best. It just means right now we're celebrating her, and that's okay. And we can do that. So we try to do that when we're celebrating anything that's going on in our family. Of it's okay to, even if it's a birthday, we're going to celebrate this person today, and it doesn't mean they're the favorite. It doesn't mean that we love them more. It's because it's okay to celebrate people. We don't have to be scared about what that says about us if other people are doing well.
Man,
Does that make sense?
whew. I think we need like an adult lesson in that. Like I'm kind of wishing I could rewind and reparent my kids now, just knowing that, because that is such a skill,
And
and
it takes practice.
and a heart shaping practice of doing that. And so I love that. So how do you handle? I'm just thinking back to my kids in this stage, and we went to, we all went to Charlie's baseball games, and the girls would complain about it, especially Annie. She hated going to baseball games. And then, they would go to all these baseball games, and then once a year, Charlie had to go to the dance recital. And it was like the worst day of his life ever. And I'm like, you can do this. The girls go to your baseball games all the time.
For sure.
So I know that, like, even when you're training your kids on celebrating others and being there for each other, I know there are times where they have to complain.
Oh, for sure.
So how do you handle that?
It is reminding them that we celebrate each other, reminding them how many games that we all go to. And sometimes it's even being vulnerable and like, you know what? I wouldn't pick all of Saturday to spend in Russellville watching 15 soccer games. Like, that's not exactly my, top day. But this is what we do because we're family.
Yeah.
And kind of just restating that narrative of we are going to cheer each other on, and you're part of that. You're part of the family.
Yeah. And it takes doing that repetitively. Like, I think sometimes we want to sit down and explain that to our kids, and for, Charlie to say, oh, Mom, you are right, at 8 or 9 years old, to say, oh yeah, I totally understand that. You're right. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to enjoy the dance recital. I mean, no.
It hasn't happened for us yet.
Yes. I mean, if that happens for you, let me know, because I would love to congratulate you and buy you a gift. But that doesn't usually happen. But over time, as they mature, which I think is such a key concept to keep in mind during this stage, is you're seeing glimpses, but most of the time you're kind of seeing immature version of these little people. But you are starting to see some glimpses of hope for the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, the complainer might complain on the way to the game, and maybe even at the game. But then I'll hear them say, "That was a great shot," or something where they're paying attention.
Yeah.
They get it.
Yeah.
And even if that's for like a little bit of the whole game,
Yeah.
I think that's winning.
Yeah. What about behaviorally in this stage? Because discipline really, you move from kind of a real black and white discipline with toddlers and preschoolers, and now you move into a stage where you can use more consequences that kind of make sense sometimes. You know, if you left something out in the rain and it got ruined, I'm so sorry. Like, you can empathize with them, but you can let them suffer some consequences in this stage. Whereas, you know, if your toddler's about to stick a knife in a light socket, first of all, why do they have a knife? That was a bad illustration. But like, you have to just stop them. You can't let them suffer consequences. But as you move into this elementary stage, you can begin to let them suffer consequences. And so, talk to us a little bit just about discipline and behavior and maybe what that looks like at your house.
I think that it's important to know that or maybe just to remind ourselves that as parents, it's not our job to outsmart our kids and come up with a big enough consequence that will make them never make that poor decision again. Because that doesn't work for me. I still sometimes yell at my kids, even though I know that it's my own issue and I know that it will hurt them. And yet, that consequence doesn't seem to be enough to actually stop my behavior sometimes. And so if all consequences haven't made me perfect, it's not my job to have big enough consequences to make my kids perfect when they're, 7.
Yeah, I love that. I want to put up the scripture from Deuteronomy, and I'm going to read it first, and then I'm going to explain the context of it, because at first I was like, wait, are you sure that you put the right reference and this is the verse you want to use? But we're going to explain it. And it says, "Your clothing did not wear out on you, and your foot did not swell these 40 years." Are you with us, or did we lose you? Okay, let me explain this. And so the context of this is God talking to the Israelites, and he's reminding them, you wandered in the desert for 40 years because you had sinned, and I said, you're not going to get to go into the promised land. That was the consequence, okay? Not get to go in the promised land. That had a lot of consequences that came along with it. But then he says, but for those 40 years, I took care of you, and your clothing did not wear out. Your foot did not swell for these 40 years. And you have some things to say about this verse too, but what it made me think about is exactly what you were saying with consequences. Sometimes as a parent, and especially, who am I kidding? In all of the years, a lot of times when you give your kid a consequence, you are wanting a certain response from them. You're either wanting them to, break down and be remorseful, or sometimes you just want them to be upset that they got a consequence and then come back and apologize. And sometimes they're like, fine, I don't care. And this verse was a reminder to me that the consequence from God to the Israelites was, you're not going to go into the promised land. What he didn't do was continue to heap consequence upon consequence upon consequence with more of a heart of punishment. And sometimes we do that.
We do.
As moms. And so he said, I've given you the consequence, but within that, I'm going to take care of you. And so you have a little bit of a different spin on why you chose this verse.
This verse has been important for me and for our family just over the past specifically 2 years in regards to COVID and just the losses that I think all of us have felt to some extent, just different, whether it be death or whether it be that my fifth grader at the time didn't get her like a promotion when she finished elementary school. My kindergartner started during COVID times, so that there's losses of all kinds. Some relationships have been really challenging through these years, but there's also been some really good things in the ways that we've been able to bond as a family, or conversations that have happened that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And like my husband and I have both been able to keep our jobs, which has been a real blessing and hasn't been true for everyone. And when when the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, they felt their share of suffering. They were walking everywhere, they were eating nothing but manna, and literally everyone's parents were dying. But God was there. And I think that that has been so important for me in parenting, and important as we've gone through a pandemic and all the loss that that has brought, that God's still here with us, for me and for my kids, and for the losses that they feel.
Yeah, he's still providing for our needs. He sees the little things, like
They didn't
your
ask for
feet.
their feet not to swell.
Yeah, I mean,
That was a good thinking. Like, it
That-
would have been a good thing to ask for.
that would have been a good thing to ask for. I mean, I'm thinking like, it only takes a day or something. For me, 40
Yeah.
years, like that's pretty impressive. So, I know you have another verse that I want to go back to, kind of spiritual development in ourselves and in our kids, and that's 2 Corinthians 3:18, and it says, "And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another, for this comes from the Lord, who is a spirit." Talk to us about that verse, what it means.
I think as parents, we come alongside our kids. It's not parents versus kids, parents trying to make their kids obey or do things the right way. We are all growing into the image of God. And I think when our kids see that we're on the same team as them, not in like we're buddy-buddy and I'm not still given the authority by God, but in the sense that I need Jesus like they need Jesus. And when they make mistakes and need to repair relationships, I also make mistakes and need to repair relationships. And in that sense, we're along the same journey. We're headed in the same direction of being transformed into the same image. And when my kids start believing in Jesus, they aren't given a junior Holy Spirit. They're given the real deal. And God can work in their hearts and work in their life to open their eyes and help them see things. And I can help in that, but He's at work in their lives and drawing them to Himself. And that's really encouraging to me.
Yeah, I love that. We could go on and on, because I love your family and I love your stories and so many of the things that you guys have done as parents. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave us with before we wrap up?
I think on a practical level, one thing just to encourage family relationships and cheering each other on. We started doing at Christmas, you guys might do this, but we do like a sibling gift exchange. Since there's 4 of them, that's kind of a lot of money. So we draw names and they get like $15 to $20 to pick out a gift for the person that they drew. And I think we started this when Eliza was maybe 2, and it has been the sweetest thing, so much so that we've continued it to birthdays, but they do like a sibling gift, still $15 to $20, where they can kind of have some skin in the game. And to see the looks on their faces when the sibling opens the gift is so exciting, and it kind of gives them something to look forward to about Christmas and birthdays, other than we're just celebrating this person that's not me, they can look forward to them opening that gift. Or at Christmas, it's not just the gifts that they get, it's, oh, this person gets to open this thing that I picked out. And it's been a lot of times it's things I would not normally pick.
That's what I was going to say. It's fun to see, because we weren't very good about starting that when they were really young, but we have as they've gotten older, and it's really fun to see like what they give each other, because they know each other on a different level than we know our kids, and it's fun to see them develop that relationship.
Yes, I think Drew was 5, and he drew Eliza's name, so she must, I don't know, whatever, how old, she was young, and he was like, I know what she wants, a stuffed hedgehog. And I was like, we don't need more stuffed animals. This seems really silly. But he was like, no, for sure. He like picked out the one he wanted, and he goes, and you know what else? I think she needs like a carrying case. I don't even know what you call it. Like a carrying case. I think it's a real carrying, like for a gerbil or something. I don't know. But he got one that like the hedgehog fits inside, and it's like 5 years later, and she still carries around this hedgehog. Loves it. And I would have never picked a stuffed hedgehog with a carrying, I don't even know what it's called.
For multiple reasons. For multiple reasons.
Seemed very impractical.
Yes, yeah. I love that though, because it's just a tangible way to think about others and to love them in a way that requires knowing and thinking about another person.
And there's a lot of simple things that we can do to invest in our kids, even if it's, sometimes it's planned family activities. And I had knee surgery in May and had to go to physical therapy for a while. And at that point, I guess it was March, at that point my kids didn't go to school on Fridays in person. And so I took Sophie with me to physical therapy because she's my only chance at somebody medical. And she would come and count my repetitions, which was really helpful because I couldn't keep track of it. And we'd drive to Starbucks afterwards, literally just go through the drive-thru and get a cream cheese Danish and split it. She didn't get to pick anything. It was like you get half a cream cheese Danish. We ate it in the car because it wasn't even open, and she loved it.
Yeah.
And it was like this one-on-one time where I was doing what I needed to do, and I wanted a cream cheese Danish. Like, this totally served me, but yet you can kind of make it into this one-on-one time where you can build these relationships just as you're going. It doesn't have to be something big or expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, that was physical therapy's kind of.
Yeah, but not the cream cheese Danish.
Right.
We can afford
the half a cream cheese Danish I offered her.
I love it. Man, thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
this has been so fun. Let me pray for us, and then we'll head out to our small groups. God, I just thank you for today. I thank you for Keri and Stephen and their family, and what a joy it has been to get to know them and watch their kids grow up. And I just thank you for the wisdom that you have given Keri and Stephen as parents. And I just pray that you would bless them, bless their family as they continue to raise their kids, that they would continue to be just a reflection of you to their family and to a watching world. God, I just thank you and praise you for everything you've given us. Go with us today. Would you just continue to teach and refine us and make us more like you? In Jesus' name, amen.